We expect that if massive, systemic corruption were definitively proven, society would instantly self-correct. We assume that cold, hard evidence automatically triggers public outrage and accountability. But history shows us a different pattern. Major human rights violations and illegal corporate collusions are routinely dragged into the light, and yet nothing changes. Instead of a revolution, a strange apathy settles in. Sociologists call this the speculation to fact gap. When a wild conspiracy theory is unproven, it grips the public imagination. But when the crime is confirmed through methodical legal proceedings, it loses its cinematic thrill. When the vault opens, the public has lost interest. Even when violent insurrections are broadcast live to the world, they eventually get absorbed into the daily background noise. This collective shrug is the result of active, systemic conditioning designed specifically to lower our cognitive defenses. Normalization is a deliberate psychological weapon, a tool used to induce mass cultural gaslighting. This diagram illustrates the biological concept of habituation. Living in a state of constant outrage is exhausting. The first time a corrupt act occurs, the brain's firewall blocks the shock. But human neurology is hardwired to ignore repetitive stimuli to prevent cognitive overload. Bad actors exploit this biological loophole. By pushing boundaries millimeters at a time, they slowly shift society's baseline of acceptable reality. By the time the 100th transgression occurs, it slips right past our defenses. Normalization repurposes our own survival instincts, turning our biology into a mechanism that makes us accept the unacceptable. This erosion rarely starts with a sudden collapse. In business and government, it begins at the micro level with what is known as the cheese slicer effect. Small ethical corners are cut and immediately justified for the sake of efficiency or convenience. Because these initial deviations don't immediately cause a disaster, those compromised ethics become the new standard. To lock in this new baseline, the system has to change the way we talk about it. This is where semantic drift takes over. Corrupt systems rename horrible things to sound boring or even positive to launder reality. Bribery becomes lobbying. Dehumanizing rhetoric is defended as an internet meme. Ignoring these linguistic shifts isolates a society. It creates a breakdown in communication, where accountability is replaced by dangerous confusion. Before any physical violence or systemic atrocity can take place, the language surrounding it must first be successfully degraded. The modern tactic relies on overwhelming the public with sheer chaos. Political strategist Steve Bannon stated the method plainly: flood the zone with excrement. The strategy is to release dozens of transgressions, scandals, or entirely incoherent statements in a single day. The volume is so high that the media cycle simply cannot keep up. This creates profound psychological exhaustion. When lies are pumped out faster than anyone can fact-check them, the pursuit of truth itself becomes tiring. Eventually, society enters a state of cultural alexithymia, a clinical inability to identify or describe emotions. The population literally loses the vocabulary to process the corruption they live in. Autocrats prioritize the destruction of a shared concept of truth over the persuasion of specific lies, inducing a state of helpless apathy. Repetition alone isn't enough to secure normalization. It requires the complicity and silence of powerful institutions that are supposed to act as guardrails. Watch political leaders over time. Initially, they offer active resistance to unprecedented behavior. But with every new transgression, that resistance quietly transforms into moral surrender and total acquiescence. Mainstream media often defaults to acting as a stenographer. They take unprecedented, rambling authoritarian rhetoric and dutifully frame it as normal, coherent policy for consumption. Corporate America makes a similar calculation. Companies prioritize transactional profit, staying silent in the face of retribution, and abandoning their stated values the moment it threatens their bottom line. When the systems meant to oppose corruption treat a constitutional crisis as standard politics, they validate the behavior for the general public. History provides a clear record of what happens when the baseline fully shifts and a society entirely absorbs dehumanizing language. When marginalized groups are labeled as vermin or poison, it reframes mass extermination. It turns cruelty into pest control or detoxification, masking atrocity as a necessity. In 1994, radio broadcasts in Rwanda spent months calling the Tutsi minority cockroaches. This normalized media propaganda directly paved the way for 800,000 murders in just 100 days. The pattern repeats today. In Myanmar, years of officially categorizing Rohingya citizens as illegal immigrants preceded violent ethnic cleansing and mass displacement. We are already seeing normalized rhetoric produce tangible harm domestically. Dehumanizing language creates permission structures for escalated state actions, wrongful detentions, and the deployment of tactical forces against citizens. This is the true bummer. The loop of normalizing bad behavior permanently degrades the ethics and safety of an entire society, leaving the most vulnerable exposed. But we are not powerless. Individuals can actively fight back against this psychological weapon using strict cognitive discipline. This waveform diagram illustrates the first defense, building an internal awareness threshold. Think of it as a psychological tripwire that instantly flags corrupt actions before your brain has a chance to habituate to them. You practice mental dualism by stepping back and becoming the observer of your own mind. You analyze the shock as data, which preserves your outrage without letting the chaos consume you. This leads to a strict, actionable rule. Refuse to use sanitized language. When you see racist or authoritarian rhetoric, name it precisely for what it is, every single time. And you cannot do this alone. Joining collective community networks breaks you out of an isolated environment and establishes an early warning system that protects the group. Normalization only wins when we stop noticing. By preserving our cognitive friction and calling out the mechanism aloud, we permanently break its power.